Good morning, Wolfpack. Thought of the day. Buckle up. This one's going to be a little bit longer. I generally try to keep them under 2 minutes, but I think I'm going to probably be pushing about the 10-minute mark, so fair warning. Today's topic comes from kind of the situation that we're in right now. Right now, you all are going through final exams. These are not only just final exams, these are midterm exams, which I don't know how the quarter system works with all of that, but generally, in my experience, mid of the year, midterm or end of the semester, is a really big deal. We also have a tournament coming up on Saturday. And as a team, we've had a few tournaments, a couple matches, and we've had some success and we've had some failures. And that's the topic of the day, is failure. And I want to point out first and foremost that success and failure, they're not opposite sides of the coin. And we'll get into why. But success and failure are kind of like light and shadow. Without one, the other doesn't exist. So failure, as most people see it, is generally considered negative. It's a negative thing. It's a bad thing to happen. It's a lack of. It's a lack of success. It's a lack of skill. It's a lack of ambition. It's a lack of resources. It's a consequence. Oh, you didn't do this, so this. You didn't do this, so this. Or it's a punishment. Well, if you'd have just done this, you would have had that. And I feel that that viewpoint is pretty narrow. It's kind of small brain, right? Because failure is both relative and ambiguous. How is it relative? Well, relative means that the accuracy, the details change the end result. So like, for instance, you go to school, you get a C. You're busting your tail, you get a C in a class. As a parent, I can tell you, I don't like seeing C's. D's are not acceptable, but I don't like seeing C's. It should be a B. And if you can get a B, why is it not an A? To me, a C is a failure to meet your potential. Okay, but that's from my view, right? From your view, you're struggling through this class. You're trying to keep up with your obligations to your home. You're trying to keep up with your obligations to your other classes. You're trying to keep up with whatever stresses are coming through life. And I know with your entire generation, those stresses are immense. You're trying to also, maybe you just don't really have a firm understanding of that subject. And you're struggling and you're putting the hours in, you're studying, you're going, and you squeeze by with a C. That's not a failure. Not for you. That's a success. That's an overwhelming success. That is you pushing against odds to make the passing grade. So, relative, right? I go out and I run an 8-minute mile. To me, that's a success right now. 10 years ago, I would have been dogging on myself about that. Why isn't it 6? 20 years ago, it's why isn't it 5? Okay. So, time and perspective can change whether something is a success or a failure. Now, let's talk about ambiguity. Ambiguity basically means that something doesn't have a really well-defined meaning. And so, what is viewed as a failure can sometimes be success, even within the same situation. So, you might go out and you might compete. Let's just use wrestling tournament. You might go out and you might compete in a wrestling tournament and you come in second. Okay. Not the best, but certainly not bad, but you won it first. You failed. You failed to get first place, but you got second place, and now you also qualify to go to a regional tournament. Sometimes it's a matter of points. Sometimes success or failure is a matter of circumstance. In other words, from my military background, you can lose a battle and still win the war. In fact, a good historical example is General George Washington, 5-star general, lost almost every battle he fought and won the war. He failed at almost every turn except the one that mattered, which was drawing out opposing forces, thinning them out, wearing them down, and making the enemy bleed literally and bleed treasure to try to overcome them. Throughout the entire conflict of the Revolutionary War, many people considered him a grave failure as a military officer. But his actions, his advancing in reverse, as we would say, are what allowed us to a large extent, what allowed us to establish this nation. So that's a pretty extreme example, but I think it's pretty pertinent. Everything that you're going to deal with life is going to be about mindset. Ultimately, when it comes to failure, you can view it as a bad thing, and that's okay. I will not sit here and say that I have not experienced anger and sadness, rage, even depression, extreme emotions over failures. But at the end of the day, you have to have those emotions, feel them, and get them out of the way. Because as long as you're feeling the emotions, you're using that deeper part of your brain. The frontal part of your brain, the one responsible for rationality and logic, isn't going to be operating at full. So feel your emotions, get them out of the way, and then take the time to look at that failure. Look at what happened. Look at it in a very logical way. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Oh, I didn't know I just didn't know I was doing it and I failed. Okay. Why did you not know what you were doing? Were you not taught? Okay, let's bring this in context of, like, say, math. Were you not taught the correct work? Did you not receive the correct resources? In reflection, did you have time to go and seek out those resources? Because ultimately, your success and your failure is in your hands alone. You could have an amazing teacher, you could fail. You can have a horrible teacher, and you can pass beyond your wildest imagination. I've seen both actually in university. What else happened? Keeping with the math, let's talk about test. I know for a fact when I went into any test in college, especially math, I knew whether I was going to do well or not. I knew whether I was going to get an A or I was going to get a B, or if I was going to be getting like a D or yes, an F. I failed calculus the first time I ran through it. I had a lot of things going on in life. I had to take time off for the military. I had a lot of like stresses, and I was working and yada yada yada. Excuse after excuse after excuse. I failed because I didn't make the math the priority. And that's fine. In some cases, that's absolutely fine. In some cases, it's not the priority. So what did I do? I evaluated why I failed. I evaluated where my knowledge was lacking. And I'll tell you where my knowledge was lacking. It didn't have anything to do with the ability to reason out the work. It had to do with the waiting till the absolute last minute to do any of the work to turn in because I was prioritizing other things. And so I had to develop new strategies for approaching it. I mean, I went back and I took calculus again and I got an A, but it cost me some money. Actually, it cost me like $900. Fortunately, I was at community college, so it was cheaper than the $1,500 it would have cost me at a university. Um, that's a failure. I failed calculus. I can never say I didn't fail calculus. What I can say is that overall, my grade in mathematics was a 3.75, but that's in university. When I was in high school, I got a D, very low D at that in math. I was in a different mindset. I learned. And so that's the key. Of all of the things, of all of the motivating factors in life, of all of the ways that humans learn, we learn through failure, through pain, emotional, physical, so on. We learn through those methods better than anything else. They say positive reinforcement is always the best way to develop behavioral patterns. But I have found that failure with reflection is the best way to become successful. I fail regularly. I'm a scientist. In fact, as a scientist, a majority of what I get paid to do is to fail at what I'm trying to do. Because the things that I'm trying to do don't have a book written on them yet. So it's just like, okay, is this going to work? No, it didn't. And there's times I make mistakes, and a small mistake can lead to a failure. But why did I make that small mistake? Well, I made that small mistake because I was distracted by this, or I made that small mistake because I didn't put these controls in place to prevent it. Like labeling. I have to label everything. Every single thing. If I don't label everything I'm working with when I'm doing science, then I get lost. Just happens. So take the time when you have a lack of success. Take the time when you have a fail and feel your emotions and really, really reflect on what the core components of that failure were. In wrestling, you go on the mats. It might be a day you just don't want to be there. You might be too tired, you might be injured, you might have things going on at home or school or relationship issues. Now, ideally, you put all that away, but let's be honest, nobody puts all that away. If people were able to just compartmentalize all of that, we wouldn't have an entire program in the United States military on how to counsel and deal with personal issues that arise among soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and whatever the Space Force calls themselves. Let's not forget the Coast Guard. So all these factors might be in your brain when you hit those mats. Okay. Not sleeping, that's going to affect you. Why didn't you sleep? Was it because you were playing Fortnite, or was it because you were anxious? Well, one of those is easy to fix. You made a decision to play Fortnite. You made a decision to play a video game over getting sleep and preparing for a wrestling match. Anxiousness? Why were you anxious? Did you not prepare well enough? Were you not conditioned well enough? Were you scared? I mean, it takes a very brave person to say they're scared. It takes a very courageous person to say they're scared, because courage is not being unafraid. Courage is overcoming those fears and doing what you need to do anyway. Did you take the time to drill? Did you take the time to condition? Was your conditioning program good? All of these things come into play. Same thing with school. Did you prepare for the test? Did you review your previous tests to see where you went wrong? Because I can tell you, in university, my professors, especially within chemistry and mathematics, would take the problems that students got wrong the most, and that would be their final exam. Because it wasn't about whether you could do well or not on those individual tests. It's can you teach yourself and learn from your mistakes? And the same applies here. So the next time you experience a failure, rather than look at it like it is a bad thing, look at it like it's an opportunity. You will learn more about yourself through reflecting on your failures than you ever will through succeeding. You learn a lot about a person when they're succeeding by how they act, how they change, how they take that success. But you learn a lot about yourself through failure. And at almost 17 minutes, I will say that this is probably take number 15 on this topic. So I have failed 14 times prior to finishing this talk. And so I hope you've stuck with it. And if you have, amazing. If not, I get it. You got other things to do. But I'll see you in practice. Over and out.